We have hundreds of thousands of people here because these people are not going to take it any longer. They're not going to take it any longer. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify. And we become president, and you are the happiest people.
All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock, he let the legislatures of the state look into this so we get to the bottom of it and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not.
My wife and I were at our home in Colorado on the evening of January 4th, 2021, and the phone rang, and it was my longtime dear friend, Richard Cullen. Richard was, at the time, Vice President Pence's outside counsel. And Richard asked me, he calls me Judge, which is fine. He said, "Judge, do you know John Eastman?" And I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "John clerked with me about 25 years ago, and he's a brilliant constitutional scholar, a professor, and a friend." I said, "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, John Eastman has advised the president and the vice president, Mike Pence, today in the Oval Office that Mike Pence could essentially overturn the 2020 presidential election in 2 days from now." And I said, "You can tell the vice president that he has no such power under the Constitution of the United States or the laws of the United States, and that his only responsibility and power was to accept and count the Electoral College votes as they had been cast by the states." My wife had been sitting there hearing one half of that conversation, and when I hung up, she said, "Oh my God. Oh my God. Do you know what would happen to America if the vice president overturns the election day after tomorrow?" And she had tears in her eyes. And I looked at her and I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "You must stop this. You must stop this. This cannot happen in America."
We are going to the Capitol.
Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
Mr. Vice President, are you going to overturn the election results today?
Madam Speaker, the Vice President and the United States Senate.
I get up ridiculously early in the morning, between 4 and 5, and I got up at between 4 and 5 that morning, which would have been January 5th. And I was having my coffee with just by myself and reading the news, and Richard Cullen called. I answered the phone, and he said, "We have to do something immediately. We have to get your voice out across the country within the next couple of hours." And I said, "Well, Richard, I just am at a complete loss." I said, I'm here in Colorado with Elizabeth. It's the holidays. I'm retired. I don't even have a job. I don't have an office. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a typewriter. And I said, "I don't even have a box of stationery." And he said, "This is very, very important. I'll call you back in 5 minutes." He calls back in 5 more minutes, and he says, "Have you thought of anything yet?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm racking my brain, but I can't even imagine how I could, quote, get my voice out across the country. There's no means by which I could do that, Richard. He said, we don't have long. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. So we hung up, and I typed out on my iPhone what I would say if I could think of a way to say it. He calls back in 10 minutes, and he says, have you thought of anything at all? And I said, I have one thought. I said, I opened a Twitter account some weeks ago, but I don't know how to tweet. And he said, perfect. Do it right away. And I said, Richard, what did you not understand? I don't know how to do it. And he said, Judge, you have to figure it out now. We don't have much time. And so I said, okay, Richard, I'll try. And my office is down a level at our home in Colorado, so I went down to my office. And my son, who's a young millennial tech guy, told me how to tweet a thread. Well, he didn't tell me how to do anything. You know, millennials don't talk to their parents. In fact, he groused that he didn't have time to help me, that my wife and I needed to learn how to do this ourselves. But eventually he said, I've sent the Twitter instructions for a thread to your email, and hung up. So I opened my email, and there were the instructions, the first time I had ever seen them. Then, to make a long story short, I followed the instructions as carefully as I could. I cut and pasted what I had typed into my iPhone into a Word document, because that's the only thing I knew how to do. And then I knew how to cut that document into 140 or 180 character individual tweets or whatever. And I did that. I proofread it as carefully as I know how. Took a deep breath, hit tweet, and sent the tweet to Richard. And he called 10 minutes later or so and said, Judge, thank you. Your tweet's on the front page of the New York Times.
Pence just caved.
No.
Is that true?
I didn't.
I'm hearing reports that Pence caved.
No.
I'm telling you, if Pence caved, we're going to drag motherfuckers through the streets.
Breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol to the upper level! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
The whole number of electors appointed to vote for President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, a majority is 270. The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes. The whole number of electors appointed to vote for Vice President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, a majority is 270. The votes for Vice President of the United States are as follows. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 306 votes. Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana has received 232 votes. The purpose of the joint session having concluded, pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, 117th Congress, The chair declares the joint session dissolved. In these divided times, in these anxious days, I know in my heart that we will find our way forward as one nation. We have to find common ground. And I hope in some small way, my presence here tonight is a reminder that whatever differences we may have as Americans, the Constitution is the common ground on which we stand.